My fiancée assumed I'd never discover she was having an affair with my uncle. So I revealed the truth about both of them and ended up inheriting his portion of my grandfather's estate. I am Mark, 29, and I work as a site safety inspector for a commercial construction company in Denver. My days start before sunrise, usually on active job sites, making sure crews are following protocol and not cutting corners. I rent a one-bedroom place in Capitol Hill, and I keep my life structured. Early mornings, gym 3 times a week. My fiancée is Lila, 27, and we have been together just over 3 years. We have been engaged for 6 months. She moved into my place officially 4 months ago because it shortened her commute. She works as a real estate agent focusing on mid-range residential properties around Denver. Her income fluctuates a lot depending on the season and closings, so I cover most of the fixed expenses while she handles groceries and smaller bills. We had been discussing combining finances after the wedding once her commission stabilized. My family is established in Colorado. My grandfather built a small but valuable chain of hardware stores decades ago, and while he is still alive, the estate planning has been an ongoing topic for years. My dad has one brother, my uncle Stefan. He manages most of the business operations now and is heavily involved in my grandfather's financial decisions. Stefan has always had a strong personality. Confident, loud, used to being deferred to. At family gatherings, he tends to dominate conversations about investments and property. Lila noticed that immediately the first time she met him. She did something I had not seen her do before. She became overly attentive, asking him detailed questions about commercial properties and asset transfers, laughing at jokes she would normally call stupid. Later that night, she told me men like him always end up owning everything because they understand leverage. At the time, I assumed she was just networking. Real estate is built on connections, and my uncle owns multiple rental properties. It seemed logical she would want to stay on good terms. A few months ago, her behavior shifted. She became protective of her phone. She started stepping into the hallway to take calls. If I walked out unexpectedly, she would hang up and accuse me of hovering. When I asked simple questions about who she was talking to, she would say I was insecure and that I should focus on my own career. Last week, my uncle Stefan texted me asking to meet privately. No explanation. That is not something he has ever done before. I agreed. His next message made it clear that whatever was happening involved more than business. Stefan's next message was short and specific. He asked me to meet him at a bar near Cherry Creek that he likes, mid-afternoon, and he said it would be better if Lila did not know. That phrasing is what caught me. He and I have never had secrets from each other. We are not especially close, but we are straightforward. I asked what it was about. He replied that it was about protecting family assets and that I should hear it from him first. That sentence did not match the Stefan I know. He is blunt, not dramatic. I did not tell Lila about the meeting. I wanted to see what he would say without outside influence. The night before I went, Lila was unusually tense. She asked what my plans were for the next day twice. When I said I had a meeting with a subcontractor, she stared at me for a second longer than normal and then said fine. At the bar, Stefan skipped small talk. He ordered a drink, did not touch it, and asked me how serious I was about marrying Lila. I told him we were engaged, deposits were paid, so yes, serious. He leaned back and said that he had made a mistake and that it was going to cause problems if I did not handle it properly. That is the only way he framed it. A mistake. I asked him to be specific. He said Lila had been reaching out to him privately for months under the pretext of asking about commercial real estate advice. At first, he thought she was ambitious. Then it crossed a line. I asked what line. He said it became personal. Flirtatious messages. Late-night calls. Eventually meetings that were not about property. He said he had ended it recently because he realized she was fishing for information about my grandfather's estate structure. He claimed she asked detailed questions about how ownership shares would transfer if something happened to my grandfather before the wedding. I did not react immediately. I asked him to show me proof. He hesitated, but then handed over his phone. There were messages. Screenshots. Her name at the top. I recognized the tone instantly. The same tone she uses when she wants something. I did not confront him in the bar. I asked one question instead. When did it start? His answer shifted everything from suspicion to certainty. He said it started 8 months ago. That means it began 2 months before I proposed. I did the math in my head while he talked. 8 months ago, we were already living together most nights. We were already touring wedding venues. Lila had cried when I showed her the ring. Not in a dramatic way, but in that quiet way that made me think she was sincere. I asked him why he was telling me now. He said because my grandfather recently updated part of the estate documents and his own share was adjusted, smaller than he expected. He claimed that was when he realized Lila's questions were not casual curiosity. They were targeted. According to him, she wanted to know how marital property would factor into inherited assets in Colorado. She asked whether a spouse automatically gained influence in family businesses after marriage. She asked what would happen if one beneficiary stepped down. None of that is normal wedding planning conversation. I scrolled through the messages myself. She complimented him in ways that were calculated. You understand power structures. I like how decisive you are. I wish Mark thought more long-term like you. That last one bothered me more than the rest. It was not just flirting. It was positioning. I asked if it had been physical. He said yes. Twice. Both times at a property he owns that was supposedly being renovated. He said he regretted it. I believe he regretted the estate adjustment more than the affair. I told him I needed copies of everything. He forwarded me the message thread and screenshots of call logs. I made sure they included timestamps. On the drive home, I did not feel angry. I felt analytical. The timeline lined up exactly with when Lila started pushing harder about joint bank accounts and updating my beneficiary forms at work. When I got home, she was in the kitchen scrolling on her phone. She looked up and asked how my day was. I watched her face carefully when I said I ran into Stefan. Her expression changed for a fraction of a second. Then she smiled and said, "Oh, how is he doing?" That was when I understood she assumed I would never compare notes. I did not confront her that night. I needed to confirm two things first. One was whether this was only about money or also about ego. The other was whether she had done anything that legally exposed me. I told her dinner with Stefan had been fine and that he was stressed about business. She rolled her eyes and said he thrives on stress because it makes him feel important. Then she asked what exactly we talked about. That question was too direct. I said we discussed estate planning in general terms. I watched her posture shift. She straightened slightly and asked what changes were happening. Not if there were changes. What changes? I told her nothing concrete yet. That was a lie. I already knew from Stefan that my grandfather had rebalanced future ownership percentages based on involvement. My father stepped back years ago. I have been helping on weekends reviewing compliance issues for some of the stores. Stefan's share had quietly been reduced. Mine had increased. Lila did not know that. Over the next 2 days, I behaved normally. I went to work. I came home on time. I even asked about her current listings. Meanwhile, I contacted a lawyer I trust through a colleague. I did not give names. I asked general questions about what happens if a fiancé tries to access financial information under false pretenses. The lawyer said as long as no joint accounts were opened and no documents were signed, I was clean. We had not merged anything yet. That decision now looked fortunate. On the third night, I asked Lila directly why she had been calling my uncle. I kept my tone neutral. She did not hesitate. She said networking. That I should be grateful she was building relationships that could benefit both of us. She added that I sometimes lack ambition. That is her default tactic. Turn criticism into a character flaw on my part. I asked if it ever became personal. She laughed. Not nervous. Dismissive. She said I was being dramatic and insecure. She said if she wanted someone else, she would not hide it. The confidence in that statement told me she believed there was nothing concrete I could prove. She was wrong about that. The next morning, I asked her to sit down with me at the kitchen table before she left to show a property. I told her I did not want this to turn into a circular argument. I said I had already spoken to Stefan in detail. She went still for half a second, then leaned back and crossed her arms. She asked what version of detail he had given me, like there were multiple options. I placed my phone on the table and opened the message thread he had forwarded. I did not shove it at her. I just turned the screen so she could see the timestamps in her own words. She did not deny it immediately. Instead, she scanned quickly, calculating. Then she said those were taken out of context. She claimed it was harmless flirting to keep him engaged because she thought he could be useful for her career. I asked about the property visits. She said they were strategic, that sometimes men blur lines and women have to manage that. She implied he pursued her and she allowed it to maintain access. I told her I had asked him directly whether it was physical. I watched her eyes when I said that. The irritation came first, not shame. She said twice. Then she shrugged like it was a minor logistical detail. She said it did not mean anything emotionally, and that I was overreacting if I thought it threatened our future. That was the moment I realized her framework was entirely transactional. She was not worried about hurting me. She was annoyed that I had access to information she assumed I would never see. I asked one more question. Why ask him about marital property laws and inheritance structures? She did not hesitate. She said because someone in this relationship needed to think long-term. She said my grandfather's estate was a reality and it would be stupid not to understand how it worked before legally tying herself to me. She said herself, not us. I told her the wedding was off. Calmly. No raised voice. She laughed again and said I was being impulsive. She said I would cool down and apologize by the weekend. I told her she needed to pack a bag and stay somewhere else while we sorted logistics. My name is on the lease. That is not symbolic. It is factual. Her expression changed for the first time that day. She did not leave immediately. Instead, she switched strategies. First, she cried. Quick and sharp, like turning on a faucet. She said I was humiliating her over something that was technically over. She said I was choosing my uncle over my future wife. When that did not move me, the tears stopped just as quickly as they started. Then she got angry. She said if I blew this up publicly, it would destroy my grandfather's health. She said family reputation matters in business, and that I would look weak for airing private issues. That word stuck with me. Weak. What she did not understand is that I had no intention of creating drama. I intended to create clarity. 2 days later, my grandfather hosted one of his regular Sunday lunches. My dad, Stefan, a couple of cousins. Lila assumed we were still attending. I told her I would go alone. Before I left, I told her clearly that our engagement was officially over and that she needed to move her belongings out within 24 hours. My name is the only one on the lease. That is not symbolic. It is legal. I also told her I would transfer her portion of the last utility payment so there would be no argument about money. She called me dramatic and said I would regret rushing. I told her this was not rushed. It was concluded. At lunch, I waited until everyone was seated and the usual business talk started. Then I said I needed 5 minutes of direct conversation. I did not insult anyone. I did not speculate. I laid out facts. I explained that I had proof Lila and Stefan had been in a physical relationship for 8 months. I stated that she had been requesting detailed information about estate distribution and marital property law during that time. I passed my phone across the table and let my grandfather scroll himself. There was no shouting from me. I kept my voice steady. I made it clear I had already ended the engagement and that my purpose was transparency, not revenge. Stefan tried to interrupt at first. He said it was complicated. I told him there was nothing complicated about timestamps. My grandfather read silently for a long time. When he finally looked up, he did not look at me. He looked at Stefan. My grandfather has always been measured. He does not react quickly, and he does not raise his voice unless something is final. He asked Stefan one question. Is this accurate? Stefan tried to frame it as a lapse in judgment. He said Lila pursued him aggressively. He said it was short-lived and that he had already ended it. He avoided the part about estate discussions. My grandfather did not respond to the emotional angle. He asked whether business information had been discussed with someone outside the family who had a direct incentive to marry into it. Stefan hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. My father looked physically ill. Not angry, just disappointed in a way that makes the room heavier. I clarified one thing. I said I was not asking for anyone to take my side. I had already handled my relationship privately. What I would not accept was silence that could later be interpreted as approval. I explained that Lila believed access to inheritance was a strategic asset. I explained that she asked detailed questions about what would happen if I became majority holder through marriage. I did not embellish. I repeated her words as they were written. My grandfather asked me if I had signed anything transferring rights or naming her on any premarital financial documents. I said no. He nodded once and said that was wise. Then he turned back to Stefan and said there would be a formal review of his management role in the business effective immediately. Not because of morality, but because judgment like that creates risk. There was no shouting, no dramatic scene, just administrative consequences. When I left lunch, I had 3 missed calls from Lila. When I got home, half her closet was empty and several boxes were stacked by the door. She had clearly started packing after I left. She looked at me and asked what I had done. I told her I had told the truth. Nothing more. She stood in the living room with her arms crossed, like she expected negotiation. The first thing she said was that my grandfather would overreact because he is old school and dramatic about appearances. The second thing she said was that whatever Stefan told me was probably exaggerated to protect himself. I told her I had shown the actual messages, not interpretations, not summaries. Her words. She switched tone again. She said I had blindsided her by going public. She said couples work through things privately. She said I was immature for involving family in what she called a manageable mistake. I reminded her that she had involved my family the moment she pursued my uncle. That was not a private issue. That was a structural one. She asked if Stefan was losing his share. I said that was not my decision, but there would be a review. That was when her composure cracked slightly. Not over me. Over the possibility that the asset she targeted might shrink. That was enough clarity for me. I told her she had until the next evening to remove everything that belonged to her. I would be present while she packed larger items to avoid any later claims about missing property. I had already documented the apartment on video that morning. Not because I expected chaos, but because I prefer clean records. She called me paranoid. I said I was being thorough. By the following afternoon, her friends had helped move the remaining boxes. I transferred her portion of the utility refund and texted confirmation so there would be a paper trail. When the door closed behind the last box, I changed the Wi-Fi password and scheduled the building to deactivate her parking access. Again, not dramatic. Administrative. She started calling that evening. Then texting. Long messages about forgiveness and short messages accusing me of sabotaging her future. I did not respond. I blocked her number. I blocked her on every platform. Then I archived the thread and went to the gym. It was the first quiet evening in months. The next development came from my grandfather, not from her. My grandfather called me 3 days later and asked me to come by his office, not the house. That detail mattered. Business setting, not family setting. When I arrived, my father was there, and so was the family attorney. Stefan was not. My grandfather told me directly that after reviewing the messages and considering the timeline, he had decided to accelerate certain estate adjustments that were already under discussion. He said trust is part of stewardship, and Stefan had demonstrated poor judgment in both personal and business boundaries. He explained that Stefan's operational control would be reduced and that a portion of the ownership stake originally allocated to him would be reassigned over time. Not given impulsively, but structured. Then he looked at me and said I had shown restraint and transparency when it would have been easier to stay silent and protect optics. He said that matters in leadership. The attorney slid a preliminary document across the table outlining an updated distribution plan. If nothing changes, my eventual share will now include a significant portion that had previously been tied to Stefan's management role. I asked one question. Is this reactionary? My grandfather said no. He said the affair was not the sole reason. It was the final data point confirming a pattern of entitlement. I left that meeting aware that the outcome would look dramatic from the outside. It was not dramatic inside the room. It was administrative, documented, deliberate. Later that evening, one of Lila's friends messaged me from a different number. She said Lila had heard rumors that Stefan was losing influence and that I had somehow manipulated the situation. I did not respond. What Lila failed to understand is that I did not create consequences. I revealed facts. And facts, when placed in front of the right people, tend to rearrange power structures on their own. I have not spoken to her since. I do not intend to. There is one final piece to this that makes the entire situation feel almost absurd. The final piece is this. 2 weeks after everything ended, I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Lila had told people a completely different version of events. According to her, Stefan pursued her relentlessly, and she confided in him about doubts she was having about marrying into a controlling family. She framed herself as someone who got caught in a power struggle between men with money. If that were the entire story, I might have let it drift. What she did not anticipate was that Stefan, now under internal review and with his influence reduced, had no incentive to protect her narrative. When a few extended relatives asked him directly what happened, he admitted the relationship was mutual and that she initiated most of the financial discussions. He did not defend her. He did not defend himself much either. Word travels fast in a business community like ours in Denver, especially when it intersects with family ownership and real estate. Within a month, Lila's brokerage quietly distanced itself, not because of morality, but because clients do not like instability tied to high-value transactions. I did not contact her. I did not celebrate anything. I went back to my routine. Work at 6. Site inspections. Gym. Weekends helping my grandfather audit store compliance reports. The estate adjustments are being phased in legally over time, not handed to me overnight. There is nothing cinematic about it. The portion that will eventually come to me is larger than it would have been before. That is a structural fact. It happened because I refused to keep quiet when the situation directly intersected with family governance. I did not expose them to win money. I exposed them because I will not marry someone who sees commitment as leverage, and I will not stay silent when family assets are treated like an opportunity for extraction. If there is any lesson here, it is simple. Transparency is not aggression. And if someone assumes you will never compare stories, the most disruptive thing you can do is calmly lay them side by side. The engagement is over. The apartment is quiet. The business is restructuring. I sleep better now than I did when I thought I was building a life with her.